All my life, I was told to carry the legacy. But when I finally stepped away from the life built for me, I learned the truth about family, sacrifice, and myself. You'll continue what we started. That was not a suggestion. It was my inheritance, spoken at dinner, written into the air like it was part of the recipe for her life. My mom, Marlene, said it so often it practically echoed in the walls. We had this old walnut dining table, heavy as sin, passed down from her mother and her mother's mother before that. Every Sunday at 6 sharp, we sat there like it was church. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, iced tea in glass tumblers that sweated all over the placemats. And somewhere between passing the gravy and cutting the roast, she would say it again. Someday, all this will be yours. And I would nod, fork halfway to my mouth, pretending like it did not hit like a brick every time. I grew up in a town where people stayed. You went to the same grocery store your grandma did. You drove by your elementary school and waved to the same crossing guard 20 years later. My mom built her bakery, Sweet Marlene's, on Main Street, across from the hardware store, right next to the old bank. She started it in her 20s, back when the town was still sleepy and needed something good-smelling in the mornings. She worked like someone was chasing her. Up at 4, baking by 5, open by 7. She built it from nothing, with flour-streaked jeans and second-hand mixers. And she made it. Local awards, write-ups, and food blogs. Her name stenciled in gold across the window. People respected her. I did too. But with that pride came pressure. I was not just raised, I was groomed. Every step I took was supposed to lead me to that shop. I was 8 when I learned how to knead dough. 10 when I worked the register on snow days. 13 when I started waking up early to help her prep croissants before school. People would smile at me like I was lucky. You'll be running this place someday, they would say. Your mom's got a real legacy here. And I would smile back. I had to. I was the only child. No siblings to split the dream with. My dad was long gone. Some man with a guitar and a restless heart she never talked about. She raised me on flour, sugar, and certainty. There was no other plan. By high school, I had already stopped asking myself what I wanted to be. I told people I loved baking. I acted like business school was my idea. I buried everything else so deep I almost forgot it was there. Almost. But there was one moment, one thing I never told her. Something that cracked the shell of that perfect plan wide open. And once it cracked, it never went back. I spent my college years playing a role I never auditioned for. Majored in business administration with a concentration in small enterprise management. My classmates were future accountants, real estate agents, folks who dreamed of franchising sandwich shops. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the back row, sketching pie crusts in the margins of my notes, and trying to convince myself that loving baking meant loving the business of baking. I told everyone I was excited to take over the shop. I said it enough that I almost believed it myself. But there was this feeling that followed me everywhere. Not sadness exactly, more like an itch under my skin. A low hum of wrongness. I ignored it the same way you ignore a loose tooth. Push it with your tongue, tell yourself it'll settle. Over breaks, I came home to Sweet Marlene's and helped out. My mom was always so proud when I slipped behind the counter, apron tied, calling out orders to the back. See that? She would beam at the customers. This is the future of the bakery. People clapped. Customers smiled. And I kept pretending. The truth was, I hated the smell of yeast before sunrise. I hated scraping burned bits off the bottom of sheet pans. I hated how the flour got into every crevice of your life. Your clothes, your shoes, your damn dreams. I started sleeping in just to avoid the 5 a.m. alarm. But I never let it show. Not to her. Because Marlene had sacrificed everything for that shop. And in her eyes, I was the reward. Her legacy. Her proof that it all meant something. I was not a person. I was the conclusion to her story. I buried myself in spreadsheets and inventory plans, thinking maybe the structure would help. If I could get good enough at the numbers, maybe the rest would click. Maybe I would stop hearing that quiet little voice in the back of my head whispering, "This is not you." Then one weekend during senior year, I was helping my roommate pack for a trip when I found something in his duffel bag. Something that made my stomach drop, because it reminded me of a part of myself I had tried real hard to forget. It was not what you were thinking. No drugs. No money. No secrets. Just a paintbrush. And suddenly, everything I had been trying to suppress came roaring back. That paintbrush should not have meant anything. Just a ratty little thing, bristles stiff with dried acrylic, sitting on top of a wrinkled hoodie in my roommate Tyler's bag. But when I saw it, something shifted in me. Something old and familiar stirred, like waking up in a room you forgot you once lived in. I asked him about it. He laughed and said it was for a weekend retreat, an art residency thing in the mountains. Said he was taking a break from the finance grind to mess around with color. I nodded, said it sounded cool, but inside, I felt like my chest had cracked open. Because once, a long time ago, painting was everything to me. Before dough and duty. Before someday, this will all be yours. There was me, a paintbrush, and a sketchbook tucked under my bed. I used to draw for hours. Faces, landscapes, wild, messy ideas that made no sense to anyone but me. I never showed them to my mom. Never even dared. She called that kind of stuff a hobby, the way some people say infection. She caught me once, 16 years old, hunched over a canvas in the garage. She looked at my work, then looked through it, like it was not even there. Just make sure you finish your prep list for the bakery, she said, already walking away. That was the day I packed it all into a box and shoved it deep in the attic. I told myself I would come back to it when I had time. I never did. Until now. That night, after Tyler left, I found myself standing in the campus art building. No real plan, just followed the pull in my gut. The hallway smelled like turpentine and possibility. I slipped into an empty studio and just stood there, staring at a blank canvas. My hands were shaking. I picked up a brush. The moment it touched the surface, it was like plugging a cord back into an outlet. Everything flooded in. The colors, the textures, the part of me that still wanted something. Not inherited, not handed down, but born from inside. I stayed there until 2 in the morning. When I looked at what I had painted, it was not good. Not really. But it was honest. And I realized something that terrified me more than anything. I was still in love with this. And the life waiting for me back home. It would kill this part of me. Quietly. Permanently. But saying that out loud would mean setting fire to everything my mother built. And I was not ready for that. Not yet. After that night in the studio, I could not go back to the way things were. Not really. I still went to class. Still took notes. Still called my mom on Sundays and listened while she rattled off shop updates like I was her business partner instead of her son. But now, I had this secret. Every spare hour, I was painting. Not for anyone else. Just me and the canvas and the truth. It started with borrowed supplies and empty classrooms. Then I bought a few cheap brushes of my own, smuggled in sketchbooks under my arm like contraband. I told my friends I was just decompressing. I told myself it was temporary. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. I started skipping meetings for the Student Business Council. Skipped one too many calls from my mom. Said I was swamped with finals. That was only half a lie. Because what I was really doing was building a portfolio. I did not plan it out. It just happened. Every new piece I finished made me want to keep going. I felt like I was seeing color for the first time in years. I stopped pretending to care about bakery margins or customer retention strategies. Every time someone mentioned profit projections, my brain would drift to lighting and shadows. Dough was numbers. This was something else entirely. But I was careful, real careful, because I knew what was coming. Graduation was 2 months away. The plan, the one my mom had been sculpting since I was in diapers, was simple. I would come home, shadow her full-time, take over within the year. She had already started telling customers, "You'll love my son. He's going to bring new energy to the place," she would say with a proud little smirk. I used to smile when she said that. Now it made my stomach twist. And then, something happened that flipped the switch for good. I submitted one of my paintings, on a whim, no expectations, to a local arts showcase downtown. I used a fake name. Just wanted to see what would happen. A week later, I got the email. My piece was selected. It would be displayed in the front window of a gallery on 5th Street, right in the middle of town, 2 blocks from my mom's bakery. I stood across the street, hoodie pulled low, trying not to look suspicious while staring into the art gallery window. There it was. My painting. Hung right up front, angled so the evening light hit it just right. The colors looked louder somehow, like they were daring people to look closer. Beneath it, in small, clean letters, Artist M. T. Langford. Not my full name. Just initials and a fake last name. I figured it would keep me safe. I figured wrong. A bell jingled behind me. Someone leaving the bakery. I turned, instinctively ducking my head, but not before I caught the familiar shape of my mother's coat disappearing around the corner. She was carrying a pink pastry box and humming to herself, oblivious to the gallery just a few steps away. That was close. Too close. The next morning, I got a text from my old high school art teacher, Ms. Dalton. We had not spoken in years. Saw your work in the window. Knew it was you. Proud of you. Don't let anyone dim that light. I froze. She knew. And if she knew, I spent the rest of the week in knots. Every phone call from my mom felt like a potential ambush. I started imagining worst-case scenarios. Her walking past the gallery on her way to the bank. A customer mentioning the piece. Someone putting it together. But none of that happened. Until the weekend. Saturday morning. I was back home, helping out at the bakery for one of those surprise visits she loved so much. I was rolling out dough when I noticed the way she kept glancing at me. Not mad. Not suspicious. Just different. Like she was seeing something new. You know, she said, dusting her hands off on her apron. There's this painting in the gallery down the street. I passed it yesterday. It reminded me of you. I froze. She smiled. Had these colors I haven't seen used like that before. Kind of bold. Made me stop. I forced a laugh. Said something about how I would have to check it out. She nodded slowly. Then went right back to counting cash. That was the moment I knew. She had seen it. She recognized it. And she was not saying a thing. Which meant one of two things. Either she was waiting for me to admit it, or she was pretending it did not exist, because acknowledging it would mean accepting a version of me that did not fit her story. And honestly, I did not know which was worse. But I knew this. I could not keep living like this. Something had to give. The envelope showed up 3 days later. No return address. Just my name scrawled in handwriting I did not recognize. I found it in the stack of mail on the kitchen table, wedged between a coupon flyer and a bank statement. My mom must have tossed it there without thinking. The paper inside was cream-colored, thick, real formal, the kind of thing that makes your hands feel too dirty to touch it. I unfolded it and read the first line. You do not know me, but I knew your father. The words slammed into me like a brick. My heartbeat picked up fast, hammering in my throat. My father, the man I had only ever seen in one faded photograph. Marlene never talked about him. Not really. When I was 5, she said he was not the sticking kind. When I was 12, she called him a chapter better left closed. By the time I was old enough to ask real questions, the conversation was off limits. But now he had a voice again. Or at least someone did, speaking for him. The letter went on. It was from a man named Vincent, someone who claimed to have been close with my dad in his younger years. Said he had come across a painting in a gallery window, mine, and something about it had stopped him cold. It reminded me of how your father used to paint, he wrote. Before he gave it up. I read that sentence 3 times. Then a 4th. Then I sat down and read the whole letter again, slower this time, letting the weight of it hit me. According to Vincent, my dad had been a talented painter. A real one. Not just a guy with a hobby. He had studied art, tried to make it in the city, even sold a few pieces under a different name. But after my mom got pregnant, he walked away from all of it. Vincent said he vanished into a new life. Small town. Small dreams. Small self. I did the math. The timeline lined up. The silence made sense. My mom always said he left because he was selfish. But maybe he left because he could not live the life she demanded. Just like me. I sat there for a long time, the letter in my hands, heart buzzing like a live wire. It was like I had just looked into a mirror that went backward. A version of me who never fought back, who gave it all up and disappeared. And I wondered, had she known? Had she buried that part of him like she buried mine? Suddenly, it was not just about art anymore. It was about breaking a pattern, one I had not even realized I was caught in until right now. I folded the letter and slid it into my pocket. And that night, for the first time in my life, I made a decision without asking what she would think. I decided I was not going back to the bakery. Ever. I waited until Sunday. Felt poetic in a way. The same table. The same meatloaf. The same iced tea sweating into placemats that had seen too much. My mom was plating dinner, humming something under her breath, totally unaware that everything was about to shift. I was sweating like I had a fever. My fork barely made it off the table. She sat down across from me, hands folded, ready to launch into her usual talk about customers and flower prices and new signage for spring. I cut her off before she could begin. I am not taking over the bakery, I said. Just like that. The silence that followed was louder than a scream. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then smiled, like I had told her the wrong punchline. You are tired. I get it. Graduation stress. I am not coming back, Mom. The smile dropped. I do not want it. I never did. Her face hardened into something I had not seen in years. Not anger, exactly. More like disappointment mixed with disbelief. This is your legacy, she said, voice low. No, I said, and my throat caught, but I pushed through it. It is yours. She sat back in her chair, like the air had been knocked out of her. So what then? You were just going to throw away everything we built? I almost laughed. We did not build it. You did. I just followed the script. Her eyes glistened, but she held it in. That was her way. Break in private, never in front of company, even if the company was your own kid. I gave you everything, she whispered. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the letter, placed it on the table. She stared at it like it was poison. I know about Dad, I said. Silence again. But this time, it was loaded. You knew he was an artist. You knew what he gave up. Her lips tightened. Her jaw clenched. She looked down at her plate, like maybe the answers were hiding in the mashed potatoes. I leaned forward. My voice was shaking, but clear. I will not become him, Mom. I will not give up who I am just to make you feel safe. And then she looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw her not as my mother, not as the woman who built the bakery, but as someone scared to death of being left behind. You think I forced him to quit, she said quietly. You think I wanted to kill that part of him? I did not answer. She looked away, and then she said something that shattered me. You are wrong. He gave it up on his own. I begged him not to, but he just could not do both. He could not love us and chase it. I stared at her, stunned. I thought if I raised you right, she said, maybe you could do both. Her voice cracked on that last word, and in it, I heard everything. Her hope, her fear, the truth she had never wanted to admit. But it was too late. I had already chosen. She did not speak to me for 3 weeks. Not one call. Not one text. The silence was loud and deliberate, like she was carving it out on purpose, punishment by absence. At first, I told myself I could handle it. I had made my choice. I had stood my ground. I had done the brave thing. But the truth? It gutted me. Because no matter how much I wanted to break free, I still wanted her to be proud of me. I kept replaying that night. Her eyes, the way her voice cracked when she said he could not do both. I kept thinking maybe I had gotten it all wrong. Maybe I had built up this whole rebellion in my head, chasing freedom when all she ever wanted was for me to not disappear like he did. But even that thought, that maybe she meant well, did not change what I knew deep in my chest. Living her dream would have killed mine. So I waited. Graduation came and went. She was not there. I painted the night before, not because it fixed anything, but because it was the only thing that still made sense. Tyler helped me move into a tiny studio apartment across town. It had brick walls, leaky pipes, and a view of a dumpster. But it was mine. I took the gallery gig. They offered me a small spot in their back room, said I could teach weekend classes. Nothing glamorous, but enough to keep the lights on and paint on my hands. One evening, I got a message. From Vincent. Saw your new piece online. You are getting better. Your father would have been proud. That line nearly broke me. Not because of him. I never knew him. Not really. But because it was the first time anyone said it. Proud. I sat there in that drafty little apartment, staring at the message, wishing like hell it had come from someone else. And then I realized something that should have been obvious from the start. Legacy is not what someone leaves you. It is what you choose to carry. And I was done carrying something that never fit me. I still had not heard from my mom. But something was about to change. Because the next gallery piece? It was about her. And I had a feeling it was going to be seen. The painting was not subtle. It showed a woman's hands, flour-dusted and worn, gripping a mixing bowl like it was the only thing holding her together. Behind her, in the blurred background, a child stood just out of focus, one hand reaching for a canvas, the other still holding a whisk. I called it Split. The gallery hung it front and center for their spring exhibit. It was the boldest thing I had ever done, exposing both her story and mine, all in color and oil and silence. Opening night, I stood in the back, nursing a plastic cup of cheap wine, watching people drift by the painting. Some nodded thoughtfully. Some took pictures. And then, I saw her. My mom. She came in quietly. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Wearing the same coat she used to wear on school runs, the sleeves frayed at the edges. She stood in front of the painting for a long time. Did not look around. Did not talk to anyone. just stared. I could not move. My feet were concrete, my mouth dry. Then she did something I never expected. She reached out and touched the frame. Lightly, just her fingertips, like she was checking if it was real. And I saw her shoulders shake. She cried. Not loud, not messy, just this slow, quiet kind of crying that looks like breathing underwater. She turned and looked straight at me. Our eyes locked. I expected anger, hurt, that look she gave me when I said I would not take the shop. But that was not what I saw. She looked tired, soft, like something had finally fallen away. She walked over. I braced myself. Her voice was thin, fragile in a way I had never heard before. You got his hands, she said. He used to paint just like that. I did not know what to say. The words just stuck. I came here, she continued, because someone told me you had something in this gallery. I told myself I was coming to prove a point. But then I saw that. She looked back at the painting, and it felt like you had painted my insides. We stood there, side by side, in a silence that actually felt safe for once. She reached into her bag, pulled out something small. A photo. It was a picture of my dad holding a palette, sleeves rolled up, paint on his face. He looked young, wild, alive. I kept this, she said. I could not show it to you before. It hurt too much. I held the photo like it might shatter. And then, for the first time in my life, she said the words I never thought I would hear. I was wrong to force it on you. She looked at me. I wanted to keep something alive, but I think I was killing something else in the process. My throat tightened. She reached out, touched my arm. You are not him, she said. But you are not me, either. And I think maybe that is okay. We did not hug. Not then. We just stood there, me holding that old photo, her looking more human than I had ever seen her, and let the silence wrap around us like a truce. She left after that. No long goodbye, just a soft, almost hesitant smile before she turned and walked out of the gallery. And I just stood there, staring at the spot where she had been, heart heavy but strangely light. I knew things were not magically fixed. We were not going to fall into some mother-son montage where we laughed over cookies and painted side by side. No speech was going to erase the years of pressure, of pretending, of shrinking myself to fit the space she left for me. But she had seen me, really seen me, and that mattered more than I ever thought it would. The days after that were quiet. She did not call, and I did not push. But one afternoon, I got a package in the mail. No note, no return address. Inside was an old, flour-dusted apron. Hers. That simple gesture said everything she could not. I hung it on the back of my studio chair. Not to wear, just to remember. Because legacy is not something you inherit like furniture or recipes or a building with your last name on the awning. Legacy is what you choose to carry. And more importantly, what you choose to leave behind. Some nights I still walk by the bakery. The lights are dimmer now. She only opens on weekends. People say she has been slowing down, handing more shifts to the newer girls. A few regulars ask about me. She tells them I am doing his own thing. I like the way that sounds. Doing my own thing. I still paint in that tiny apartment. Still teach weekend workshops. I sold 3 pieces last month, and while the rent is still tight and my hands are always stained with color, I have never felt more alive. Every now and then, I get this flash, this pang of what could have been if I had just gone along with it. The keys to the bakery. The pride in her eyes. The safe, quiet life on Main Street. But then I remember that night in the gallery. The look on her face when she saw herself in my art. That was real. That was enough. I lost something when I walked away from her dream. But I found something too, something deeper. The version of myself I buried long ago under duty, silence, and sugar-coated expectations. And I think my dad would have understood. Sometimes you do not honor a legacy by continuing it. Sometimes, the truest way to respect it is to break it.